even though there are some countries like Poland and Australia who still have like at least 50 years of silver reserves, the fact that the major producers like China and Mexico are running low, it could be very serious.
This is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend Mario Eneko from the very popular Maneko64 YouTube channel. Mario, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome, Elijah. And hope you're doing well.
Doing very well here. Hope you're doing well as well. I did want to ask you today about silver because, regardless of where the price is, it's really important to go back to the fundamentals of silver. One of the arguments out there that's been out there for a while is that, or when silver is used in industry, it's often just thrown into the landfill, and really it would be very hard to get that silver back. And people have been saying that silver could be depleted. It could be very difficult to mine silver in the future. You recently put out a video analyzing an article that makes that case. Can you share that with our viewers?
Yeah, I recently got in contact through Twitter with someone called Bai Zhaojun. He's a Chinese analyst in precious metal space. His Twitter handle is @Oriental_Ghost. If anyone's interested, you can follow him too. I try to get him on my channel, but his spoken English is not as good as his written English. And he sent me some articles that he's written in the last few years about the topic. And the one I spoke about a week ago, on the 14th of June, was one that he wrote on the 25th of September, the impending eruption crisis, silver extinction. So he's been warning about this for the last few years. And to put it in a nutshell, he talks about how the major producing countries like China and Mexico, they have very little time left in terms of known reserves that have been studied by the US Geological Survey, USGS. Even though there are some countries like Poland and Australia who still have like at least 50 years of silver reserves, the fact that the major producers like China and Mexico are running low, it could be very serious. The other thing he talks about is the fact that not just the banks, the bullion banks, but also a lot of the silver mining companies, they try to also hedge their production by selling short, and they do a disservice to the silver space, according to him. And one of his arguments about recycling is that the price has been kept so artificially low that it doesn't pay to recycle. And silver, of course, is very important. He talks about this 5-year plan that they have in China, and that by 33 or 32, they need to go into the alternative energy space, and silver needs to be used a lot for photovoltaics, for the solar panels, and a lot of other technologies. And it's a matter of that is really important, not just for stackers, but I think the Chinese see it more as a very strategic commodity or metal that they need in order to keep developing and growing their economy and going into a more alternative energy economy. And silver is a huge part of that, according to him. So he thinks that Mexico, for example, 2 years ago, Mexico only had like 6 years left of USGS reserves. So now we're down to like 4 years, and China is down to about 9 years. So this could happen very suddenly. And the way to stop it, he thinks, is for the price to adjust a lot higher. Then it would make it economical to scrap silver, to recycle silver, because, as you said, there's a lot of silver out there that's just wasted because it's not economical to recycle it. But if it was at $100 or $200 or $300, then it would stop a lot of the depletion of the underground reserves of silver. And I thought it was really interesting. And yeah, people have been talking about that for long. And I saw the other day Keith Neumeyer from First Majestic Silver talking about the fact that about 1 billion ounces, I think, of silver trade every day, which is the annual production, and that in the last couple of years, the production has been a lot lower than the demand. So yeah, it's a problem. And of course, the price, the paper price, it's like a distraction. I think Andy Schechtman talks about that. It's like yeah, don't watch the fundamentals. Just watch the price. Don't get involved. It's almost as if it's trying to discourage people. So I think we need to be very patient. If you like me have been a silver stacker for many years, I think the time will come, and it could be very soon. It's a matter of not 10, 15 years, according to Bai Xiaojun. I hope I got his name correctly. It's a matter of maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years, which is very close.
And one of the key elements here is, people might say, well, all you have to do is have new mines, right? Mining the silver resources out there in the earth, but it takes a long time to develop a new mine. You have to start in the exploration stage, development, all that. It takes, about 20 years or so to actually get something rolling. Can you expand on that and how, it's not just a quick fix if we start running out of silver?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've learned over the last few years about the mining space, that it takes, like you said, sometimes 20 years, sometimes maybe less, 10 years. And if you look at the USGS data, there are some countries that still have a lot of reserves underground. But if what he says happens to Mexico and China in the next 3 to 5 years, it will be too late. It will be too late. China and Mexico are really important producers of silver, one of the biggest, and that's why it's so important. And the other thing about silver is there's very few mines as well that produce just silver. It's usually a byproduct of base metals, so people haven't really focused too much on silver. There's very few pure silver plays out there.
Now, when it comes to recycling, because that's obviously one of the ways we could get more silver, but when silver is used in technology, it's typically very small amounts, and then the computer just goes to the landfill, or whatever technology it is just goes to the landfill. So that silver is just sitting there, and it would be very hard to retrieve that. What is your perspective on? What is your take on that? Because is it really feasible to go to landfills, or how is this going to be recycled in the future?
Yeah, well, that's something that I haven't really looked into. It's not really my specialty, but I would say if silver was trading at $300, I think you might get a lot more scrap silver coming through. I think a lot of people who might have some silver that might not be as adamant about silver as money like we are, and stackers, they might get rid of it. I might get rid of some of my silver if it goes to 300, 500. So I think that's what he means. As for the landfills, I'm sure someone might find a way to, at $300, let's say, and I'm not saying silver's going there, but if it were, they'll find a way maybe to retrieve silver and make a profit. I don't know how, but that's something that happens when such things happen, when prices rise so much.
Definitely. And as for other precious metals, your perspective on that, it seems like silver is unique in some respect, because when it comes to gold, it's all the gold ever mined, almost all of it is still above ground, in vaults somewhere. So it seems like a unique situation that we're seeing with silver being depleted in this way.
Yeah, I mean, the stock to flow ratio of gold is like 84 years, and silver is, like you said, is consumed. So silver is both a monetary metal and an industrial metal. And I think the Chinese, though, want the silver more for the industrial use. I'm not sure they're into monetary silver. I could be wrong. Yeah, and that's the difference. And maybe that's why gold is a better store of value in the long term, because it's not consumed, and that's one of the qualities of money has to be that it's not consumed, because then there's not as much volatility in the price. And that's why silver is so much more volatile, because the stock to flow ratio, I'm not sure what it is, but it's a lot lower than gold's.
And that does present, obviously it might not be as stable as gold, but that does present an interesting opportunity if people can play it right, buying silver cheap and then selling it later at a higher price. Obviously, we can't guarantee that, but that's the argument there. And when it comes to the gold-silver ratio, it's quite high right now, historically high, around 80-1. What is keeping silver so cheap right now?
Well, I think it's the bullion banks with their paper games, really, to be honest. And maybe this Chinese analyst says, even some of the silver mining companies, because the other thing he said is they don't want they're making money already at $24, $25, and if it goes higher, they'll get more labor demands in Mexico. People are going to want more wages. They're going to be taxed more. So they're just trying to it's like they're not maximizing their profits. And I think that's what's happening as well. So it's not just the bullion banks. The bullion banks facilitate the hedging and the shorting, according to him. And I think, frustration, because prices always dictate the sentiment, and if they can keep the paper price low, the interest is not there. But I've noticed that the U.S. Mint is not really stepping up to the plate in terms of providing bullion silver coins, and they're supposed to. And the premium for the silver eagles are very high. So yeah, it's this paper price is it's frustrating, but I don't think it's real. And eventually, it's gonna reset a lot higher.
And we do have a playlist on our channel about precious metal manipulation, which I'll link in the description of this video, that kind of gives all the details on that and the perspectives out there. One of the things I did want to discuss as well, kind of changing gears here, is still on the topic of commodities and precious metals. The BRICS summit is coming in August, and actually I think it's 25 countries have petitioned to join BRICS. So that's kind of crazy. It's becoming a large section of the world if, they let these other countries in. And one of the countries that is definitely significant that is looking to actually be present at the conference is France. President Macron of France wants to be there. Your perspective on that and the significance of this, because as we've talked about in the past, and as Andy Schekman has really highlighted many times, is the BRICS are looking to develop a new reserve currency, possibly backed by gold or commodities, that could rival the dollar, and so many more countries are looking to join.
Yeah, I mean, the French have a history of seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, they saw that the U.S. was deficit spending with the Vietnam War and the Great Society experiment of Lyndon Johnson. And they did what they were entitled to, which was exchange or ask for redeemable, they redeemed their dollars, Federal Reserve notes or Treasury bonds or notes for gold. And they basically led to a run on the U.S. Treasury and the breakdown of the Bretton Woods. And I think Macron and whoever advises him, they see the writing on the wall now as well for the petrodollar, which came after the Bretton Woods, the gold-backed dollar. And I think it's significant. Some people could argue that he might be going there to spy for the West, and maybe that's why the South African president hasn't decided to allow him to be present at the summit. But we'll have to see. Just the fact that he's interested, I think, is very significant. Even if he doesn't go, it goes to show that a country like France is aware of how important the BRICS are going to be in terms of a new financial monetary architecture for the world. So the summit is August 22nd to 24th. And I think the Ministry of Finance of France visited, or the foreign minister, I think, the foreign minister visited South Africa on Monday. And Catherine Colonna, and she visited with the South African foreign minister. And now it's up to the president of South Africa to say yes or no to Macron. So it's becoming more like the alphabet group, because BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. But like you said, there's 25 other countries asking. Pretty soon, it's going to be A to Z group, not BRICS.
That's a very good point, and it seems like the mainstream is covering this as just, it's just a collection of pretty small nations with small economies, and it's just a random collection of countries around the world, not very significant. But if you really look at it, if you look at purchasing power parity, for example, of their GDPs, the BRICS has surpassed the G7. So it's not an insignificant group of countries there.
No, and I think the West, unfortunately, we've indebted ourselves so much as a bloc: national debt, government debt, public debt, household debt, corporate debt. And I'm not saying the global South doesn't have debt problems, but I think the other thing as well, people don't realize these countries outside the West, they're not as socialist as we are. Even China, I would say, is considered a communist country, but I'd say they're a lot more capitalistic than the West, which sounds weird and paradoxical, but it's true. And I'm not saying I agree with all the Chinese policies, but I think Macron sees that this is an important train to maybe have a seat in, not just the West, and maybe he's hedging his bets.
And it seems to be, I guess, a greater separation between the East and West as well, especially with respect to the war in Ukraine, where we've had the sanctions. And that seems to be one of the motivations to develop this new reserve currency. We're also seeing tensions with respect to Taiwan. You recently did a video on this and how it could impact what the Federal Reserve is going to be doing. If you could expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, Taiwan, there's been a lot of talk recently and saber rattling. And I also saw that, I think yesterday, President Biden called Xi Jinping a dictator. The Chinese weren't very happy about that. And this week, or is it late last week, Secretary of State Blinken visited China, and they did see him. He was supposed to have gone in February, but you had the balloon thing. But I think if there's a conflict between the U.S. and China vis-a-vis Taiwan, it could mean the Chinese could say, well, we're not going to buy treasuries, we're going to dump all the treasuries, or the Americans might even freeze their reserves. And I think that's why China's been buying a lot of gold in the last 6 months or so and announcing it. And I also saw that they're thinking of sending Yellen to China as well, Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury. Why would they do that? Well, because they want to make sure maybe that the Chinese don't stop buying treasuries, seeing that that debt ceiling has been removed for 18 months and they need to sell a lot of debt. So it could be a really big big thing for the Fed, because if there is a crisis, that would give them a cover to maybe start increasing their balance sheet again massively, because they could use an excuse. Well, China, they're not going to be buying anymore, and we are at war or something. Hopefully, we won't be, but yeah, that's how important I think Taiwan is now. Hopefully, things will calm down, but you never know.
And I know the Fed is looking to possibly raise rates 2 more times this year. They just did pause, but it sounds like they could be switching to easing depending on where geopolitics go.
Yeah, and I think the Fed as well, they paused in the last meeting, and they said the July meeting is live, which means they can raise again. And I think the geopolitics is affecting it, but they're also looking at the economic data, so to give them an excuse not to raise anymore. And I just saw that he made a comment today, Powell, and he said, we are moving balance sheet back down, but won't go back to a scarce reserves level. So he's basically saying, we don't want to do too much to QT. So I saw that headline earlier today.
Definitely. Well, Mario, we really appreciate your time today. Before we let you go, where can our viewers find you online? And did you have any last thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. Anyway, you can find me at Maneko64 on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter at Maneko1964 is my handle. And final words, patience. If you are a precious metal stacker, I know the sentiment isn't good right now. Gold has been a little bit under pressure, but just think, that there's no way for the US, the UK, or Western Europe to carry all the debt that we have without inflating even more. So you just have to hold on and keep stacking. And I think the recent correction is just a very good opportunity to get some more.
And that reminds me about how this issue is not just in the US, right? We're also seeing similar policies in the UK and actually negative real interest rates. So it seems like it's actually worse also in the UK. Can you kind of share with our viewers economically where you are, what's happening in the UK right now?
Yeah, I mean, we had CPI data today, and they were higher than expected. The core CPI actually went up. And the problem with the UK is that we don't have the major reserve currency anymore. I think we did up until World War II. So we can't print willy-nilly like the Fed can and keep rates as low as they kept. So we have a CPI of 8.7 and our base rate is 4.5%. So, and it's been negative ever since the 2008 crisis. So it's all coming home to roost now. And I think, unfortunately, our economy is going to go into a deep recession because mortgage rates are going up now because bond yields are going up, government bond yields. And the real estate market is very important for the UK economy because we've been deindustrialized in the last 50 years, and our economy is based on consumer credit, borrowing, and spending.
It sounds like, not only the US, as you mentioned, but also the UK is having economic issues, which kind of takes us full circle about even if, the metals may be under pressure right now, it's important to look at the fundamentals of why to invest in metals in the first place. So Mario, we really appreciate your time and insights today. And thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
God bless, Elijah, and thank you for having me.